If Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is trying to soft launch his campaign ahead of what we presume will be next year's federal election, it's not off to a great start. He wanted a reset after the difficulties, the scandals of last year. He's now got a new mission to finally tackle the cost of living crisis, the same crisis he ignored for months, but he's already gone and broken a key election promise that Labor committed to ahead of 2 elections. This is setting the stage for tomorrow's National Press Club address from the Prime Minister. He was already grilled by press gallery journalists today about his broken promise. Well, to discuss all of this, I'm joined by National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie and Executive Director of Menzies Research Centre, David Hughes. David, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shari.
Now, you are a political insider. You've worked on many Liberal Party election campaigns. You must look at this comment from the Prime Minister over 100 times. He committed to those stage 3 tax cuts. He said they were legislated. He said his word was his bond. Now he's breaking that promise. He's going to try argue to Australians that he's doing so for their own benefit. Do you think he's going to be able to sell this message?
Well, what Australians really need is a dedicated plan to get inflation under control. That's the meaningful way to deal with cost of living. So I don't think we're going to see that from this Prime Minister. We haven't seen it over the last 18 months or so. As recently as last Friday, the Prime Minister committed to delivering the stage 3 tax cuts in full. So this is an integrity issue for the Prime Minister. There's 1.7 million Australians, by my calculations, who will now be worse off on account of this broken promise. Many of them will change their vote.
Right, so they've said it's 1 million, but you actually think it's closer to 2 million, 1.7.
Yes, so every Australian every Australian taxpayer earning over $150,000 will be worse off from what's been proposed by Labor based on what we've seen. We'll find out the full details tomorrow, of course, and what was legislated, what is currently law. So that will be around 1.7 million Australians. And of course, with bracket creep, that grows every day, every year. So we'll be looking at a significant number of Australians who will be worse off as a result of these changes.
Look, it's the low and middle income earners that Labor's trying to help here with the cost of living relief. They will get some additional benefit, even though they have already had stage 1 and stage 2 tax cuts. Do you think there's any chance at all that Labor has done this because it's worried in part about the Dunkley by-election?
Well, look, it's possible, but I think, as I said, there's 1.7 million voters who will be worse off. They were promised tax cuts that now won't be delivered. So they were promised something that's now going to be taken away. And I think they're more likely to change their vote than the cohort of voters on lower incomes that weren't promised extra cash necessarily, but are now getting it. So I think there's a real risk here. And there's an integrity issue that cuts across low-income, high-income voters as well. They're now seeing a government that promised something before the election, that promised something as recently as last Friday, that is now failing to deliver that. So I think that's something that will affect all voters, including voters in Dunkley.
How do you think Peter Dutton's going in terms of his ability to claw back some of the seats? I mean, the Liberals are 22 seats behind. They need to make up 22 seats. Albanese is doing really badly. The defeat of The Voice, the many lack of transparency scandals, Israel, there's so many things that various sections of the community are angry with him over. But 22 seats, that does seem too big of an ask for Dutton to make up just in one term.
It's a big task, Shari. It reminds me, and you were around as a working journalist in his time, Kevin Rudd. Now, voters started to turn on Kevin Rudd because of some significant broken promises. And that's what we're seeing now. So it really does cut through. It's a big task, as you said, and we'll have an election potentially in the next 12 months. I think Peter Dutton is doing well. Of course, I would say that I did used to work for him. I think he's doing very well, but there's still a long way to go.
All right, let's bring in National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie now. Bridget, Labor MPs have all been called back to Canberra at a cost of potentially $500,000. We're seeing different estimates for a caucus meeting this afternoon. The caucus meeting was probably unnecessary because this amendment to stage 3 had already passed through Cabinet. Do you think this expense of bringing the politicians back to Canberra during a cost of living crisis was necessary?
Well, it's just not a good look, is it, Shari, when people are trying to balance their own household budgets past a very expensive Christmas on the top of record mortgage increases over the last 12 months. And I think Australians are absolutely sick to death of Prime Ministers who say one thing before the election and do another thing after. And that's exactly what Anthony Albanese has done. He has completely disrespected the pact between him as Prime Minister and the Australian people with breaching this promise. And, you know, as David was saying, these tax cuts, this is the third stage of a tranche of tax cuts which really were focused on lower middle income earners but sought to deal with that structural issue in our taxation system which really impacts and affects people over the long term, over the decade. These were never designed and carefully calibrated to solve an inflation issue of the government's making in 2024. They were very much designed to be fair tax system for all working Australians over the coming decade, and that is being breached by the Prime Minister and Cabinet's decision today.
Yeah, and several economists have said that, you know, having some tax relief, particularly in the high income bracket, is not inflationary. Now, I've been reporting this week about teachers. Oh, sorry, Bridget, I was just going to move on to another topic here. I've been reporting
sorry, good, all good.
On the program this week about teachers in New South Wales bringing the Gaza war into public schools. Now we learn today that teachers and school staff for Palestine in Victoria are doing the same thing, and they're pushing for pro-Palestinian content to be added to English and history classes in schools. You heard in the audio recordings that I played you on Monday night that in New South Wales there's discussions about bringing the Gaza conflict into maths lessons as well. David, the Education Minister there, Ben Carroll in Victoria, is so far refusing calls from the Jewish community to cancel a forum that's happening on Monday night to put a stop to this. Do you think that Chris Minns in New South Wales has been brilliant overall, but do you think that both governments in Victoria and New South Wales aren't being strong enough on this issue of teachers who are insisting on being advocates, not in their free time, that's fine, but in the classroom?
I agree, Shari, and look, this is horrific to see the way that this is going. I want to see our education departments focused on reading, writing, the basics. They're not doing that. 20 years ago, Australia ranked 4th internationally when it came to reading. We're now 16th. And of course, this starts in the universities as well when we're training our teachers. They're often focused on social theory, politics is creeping in as well. So those fundamentals really need to change. And as a parent as well, I'm deeply concerned.
Yeah. Bridget, do you think we need to see leadership here from the Federal Education Minister, Jason Clare?
Well, it's a national curriculum, Shari, you're dead right. I mean, rather than pro-Palestinian curricula, I would prefer to see pro-democracy curricula and actually supporting freedom and the privileges that we enjoy in a liberal democracy, not supporting a country that is governed by an organised, recognised terrorist organisation that actually has blatantly attacked our own allies. So I think getting back to the basics, obviously, as David says, but we need to see Jason Clare step up to the mark here and give some direction to our teachers, to our public institutions, to make sure that we're teaching pro-democracy education, not following, I guess, that very left-wing political agenda that's indoctrinating so many of our young Australians.
Exactly. It's bringing discrimination to the young generation just because these teachers are radicalised. Bridget McKenzie, David Hughes, thank you so much for joining me.